Hello, I am back again and I am ready. We are ready now for Katie King to start the show of Social Day 2020. So let me please introduce to you Katie King. Katie is going to be talking about AI and the future of work, harnessing artificial intelligence for good. So let's welcome Katie to the Social Day 20 virtual stage.
Minutes to talk to you about a really important subject. Artificial intelligence is probably one of the hottest topics of the moment, and rightly so. I'll explain why. But the angle I'm taking on it is even more important because it's about harnessing AI for good. I'll be talking about ethical AI, and how we can consider really democratizing this important subject so that many more people benefit from it. So really important that is, and I've got about 30 minutes to try and do justice to such an important subject. So let me get started. Bit about me, just in terms of credibility. Why am I here talking to you about a subject like this? 30 years of consulting, very much most of it being in the marketing arena, marketing, PR, digital. I've spent 10 or 12 years at the cutting edge of digital marketing, but it felt as if everyone caught up. And so, being completely transparent, my journey into AI about 4 or 5 years ago was to future proof myself, because I'm probably double the age of most of you speaking today and listening in. And it was an important pivot for me to get involved. And so I wrote a book. I researched it for a year and I interviewed some of the world's biggest brands, but also, more importantly, all of the tech disruptors who were disrupting PR, marketing, law, construction, finance, with all new machine learning and AI tools. So I've been involved in that for the past 5 years or so. There's all my links there. Love to connect with people. I'm on the editorial board of the AI and Ethics Journal, and also on a UK government task force for the enterprise adoption of AI, an APPG, an all party parliamentary group. So that's a little bit about me. But let's start by being really clear what we mean by AI. And in a nutshell, this is the capability of machines. And I don't mean robots necessarily. It could be a robot, it could be a virtual agent, it could be software tools. And it's that ability of that machine to imitate intelligent human behavior. And this is a family of technologies. And it's a technology that's really been around about 7 decades. But today, and for the past few years, it's viable because we've got cheap processing power and we've got all of the data that's come from 10 years of smartphone technology. So AI is viable. You have this family of technologies, and we're really looking at machine learning as a subset of AI. And it's the ability, again, for the machine, for the software to detect patterns and for them to then be able to accelerate their learning through experience. So an algorithm is able to do that. An algorithm is just a simple set of instructions. And then we have below that, as you can see at the bottom of this slide, the different kinds of AI, from very simple, narrow AI, where it's able to do one thing very well, a robotic arm in a restaurant flipping the burgers, an automatic vehicle, these autonomous vehicles, or maybe a piece of machinery in a warehouse, Jaguar Land Rover, that's doing intricate parts. There's all different kinds of AI. And then we start to get more into general artificial intelligence, where it's performing like a human. And we're not yet really at that that area, and then ultimately where people talk about the singularity, where they start to become more intelligent than human beings, and that's the bit that most people are actually worried about. But we're at this stage at the moment where you can see interactive AI, chatbots, smart virtual assistants. Check out Google Duplex if you haven't seen that already. On the right, you've got that text-based AI where you've got text recognition or speech-to-text recognition, which is really behind the Siris and Cortanas and those kinds of areas. Down the bottom, quite interesting from a marketing, digital point of view, sentiment analysis, all sorts of areas like that. So this is not tomorrow's world. This is not the technology of the future. It's here and now. And you can see here, many organizations for some years now, particularly in the last 6 to 9 months, have been hiring these kinds of people onto their boards. And what's really happening is business transformation. And if you think of COVID, and AI is playing quite an important role in detecting virus, actually helping all of the healthcare organizations to speed up. I know we're not there yet, but it's speeding up drug discoveries. And so activity that used to take 20 years, now in the laboratories with the help of machine learning and AI and scanning and detecting people's temperatures, AI is really helping to accelerate this drug discovery in a much, much shorter time frame. So that's more, I guess, me painting the picture for you about the landscape. Where are we today, with AI in our world, and what does it mean? But the more important bit, I'm sure, for most of you listening in, is how can we consider AI's impact on jobs today and in the future? And so I want to spend most of the time really talking about the future of work, and I'll come on to talk shortly about the ethics of AI as well. But again, I liked your sense from my style. I want to be very honest and very pragmatic, and I'm not here to pull the wool over anybody's eyes or pretend that it's taken off at scale in all industry sectors, because it hasn't. And that's because we are at these different phases. And so if you're not familiar with the Gartner Hype Cycle, go and check it out. It's really interesting. And what you're seeing there on the first curve is the innovation trigger, where all kinds of technologies become feasible, breakthroughs in science and engineering and so on. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they are needed or wanted. And so you have this huge peak of paranoia and expectation. And of course, the media, and I've been a PR consultant for many years, so I know the media very, very well. But the media haven't necessarily, social media and editorial and journals and so on, they haven't yet got, in many instances, the return on investment, the case studies, the proof points. And so they turn to HAL and Terminator and speculation and so on. And where I think we've been for some time is that trough of disillusionment, where someone interacts with a virtual agent or a chatbot or even a piece of software that's using AI for some marketing, for example, and they might be a bit disappointed. Or staff might be disillusioned and frightened because they think it's going to take their jobs, and clients might find it quite gimmicky, as is the case in my book with some banks and some others that tried it a bit too early. So we're moving closer to coming out of that trough of disillusionment and being enlightened and ultimately reaching a plateau of productivity. And so in this chart, what you see here down the left-hand side are all of the different industry sectors, telecoms, for example, or retail. And then across the top, how are they using, which function, which department in an organization is using it. And if you take retail, for example, and go across to marketing and sales, many of the retailers are using tools for their digital marketing. And maybe we're talking Phrasee or Concurred or Conversica and many, many others. Whereas telecoms are using machine learning and AI much more in their operations and their sort of behind the scenes scheduling, where they know that the weather is going to get colder, broadband lines might go down, as mine did a couple of days ago. And based on previous activity, so historic data and predictions of weather patterns and so on, they can say, we need 20,000 engineers to be in our vans and to go out and do the repair. So that's the kind of areas I'm talking about. But there are so many job functions that are taking advantage of AI. And let's look now at the next slide, which really, from a branding point of view, you've got major brands using AI in their marketing strategy. And their prediction for 2020, and we've only obviously got a few months left of this year, is predicting a 37% reduction in costs. And for some, it's about almost a 40% increase in revenue. So they're the two main drivers. Either it's helping and it's reducing costs and maybe replacing and automating some of the jobs that people are doing, or it's actually giving you, which I talk about a lot in my book, personalized marketing, sentiment analysis, much improved lead generation, and that's therefore leading to an increase in revenue. So looking at it from a business intelligence and influencer marketing point of view, you've got all these different tools. So you've got NLP, natural language processing, and AI, which is analyzing the influencer's content and assessing how suitable that actually is for the audience. So it's about alignment and much better personalization. And that's the paradox, because all this big data, all of these insights that you can get from using tools, for example, in your influencer marketing or your digital marketing, or if you're a lawyer or a doctor, you've got this information that's making things much, much more personalized and detailed, which is, the opposite of what people think. They think scary robots coming in, taking our jobs. No, you as a digital marketer, you as a lawyer, you have these tools at your disposal, and they are helping you to augment. They're giving you augmented intelligence. And that's, really the next wave of automation. So from a CRM point of view, here we're looking at a statistic: sales professionals spending 17% of their time entering data, almost 1 day per week. And so again, it's back to that. This is the fourth industrial revolution. This is about automating tasks. The tools and the packages that are there now and that will come in the next year or two are like your software as a service tools that we've been relying on for the last 10 years. So when I do my accounts, it's all automated and synced to my bank, and I don't have to do it manually like I did with my VAT receipts years ago. This is that next layer of automation for your CRM, your sales, your digital marketing. It does not mean us digital marketeers are out of jobs, but it does mean we invest in some of these tools, like we've invested in, Hootsuite or Buffer or other kinds of tools. We're going to be investing in some of these AI tools. So the AI is detecting irregularities, duplicates, and other kind of errors, and helping with the customer centricity, getting closer to that customer, eliminating that manual data entry and so on. So that's a few examples of how it's being used. I think about it in terms of impacting all aspects of a business: the sales, the marketing, but also the HR, as well as finance and other areas. So it's very closely aligned. What you do in CX, in customer experience, what you do in HR, and what you do in digital sales and marketing and PR, all of those disciplines together. So from an HR point of view, in this slide, we're looking at how HR departments are using AI tools for company culture, for retention of employees. And so you've got a tool here, Culture Amp, and you've got Airbnb, brands like that are actually using it. They're conducting surveys of employees, they're doing analysis, they're finding problem areas and working with these sorts of tools to improve employee satisfaction, which is really important. So think of the role of a marketeer and a digital marketeer with all the stakeholders of an organization. We're there to communicate not just with potential clients, but with existing clients, potential staff, existing staff, shareholders, potential shareholders. It's really, really important that we think of it like that. And, really this is about this continuous feedback loop and gaining insights, whether that's for your HR or for your marketing. So how's it being used in certain industry sectors? This is insurance. And so you're looking here at tools where an insurance company like Ageas in the UK, someone can, when they are unfortunate to have an accident, a car accident, they report the incident through their smartphones in minutes. They can get a case report, they can get a quote. And what that's using is a tool that uses machine learning technology and computer vision, so it can look at a photograph of the damaged car and quickly get an estimate of the repair. From a hospitality point of view, and this is so important if you think of the impact COVID's had on, the hospitality sector. Imagine if we had this. So this is a small Japanese restaurant using AI, and it's about predictive analytics. They're predicting how many diners are coming into the restaurant. And they can do this because they can look at big data. So customers, data, weather, tourism, and with all of those kinds of inputs, they can predict up to a month and a half in advance with 95% accuracy. And what's that? What's the benefit of that? We're talking about here tripling of productivity and an increase 5-fold in their profits. And another really important sustainability benefit is the reduction in food waste as well by 70%. So that's a bit about what is AI, how's it being used in a digital marketing point of view, what are some of the examples in industry in different sectors. Now I want to turn and help you think about who. I've mentioned a couple of tools already. Who are the vendors? So there are the major AI vendors: IBM Watson, Adobe Sensei, Microsoft Azure, Google, and many, many more. But there are also all of these technology startups. Some are well established now, some have been around 3, 4, 5, sometimes more. And they are disrupting, as you can see in this slide, all different aspects of our marketing, whether it's content, paid, CRM, websites, etc. And so, like I said before, we have the processing power now, we have the data. So AI is viable now. For the last 7 decades, we've had AI winters. AI has been around since around the 1950s, which is why you hear about Alan Turing and the Turing test. But today it's viable. But what that means is this really busy landscape, and this is just for MarTech, and this is one little zooming in on one part of it. It's a bit of a wild west out there. And so I do a lot of consulting work, a lot of speaking like this, but also a lot of training. And the feedback I often get from people is, wow, we really don't know where to turn. This one zooms in a little bit more to a few areas, but it's quite a busy space. And, you need to do your due diligence. You need to look at things like Gartner's Cool Vendor and other places where you look at case studies, you ask for referrals, and you find out, do a bit of a almost like a watching brief on the competition. Who's using what? Who's got the funding? How long have they been around? So it's quite a difficult space. So the last section I really want to turn to is the ethical, transparent AI for good. So we've already considered briefly, how will AI affect us? What sort of tools will we be using? I'm really keen to for us all to think, particularly given what's happened the last 4 or 5 months, what are we here for? What's our purpose? So I think of Simon Sinek, and it starts with why. And so lots of us know what we do, how we do it. Let's concentrate a bit more on why we do it. What's our purpose? And so here you've got some examples of, this is in India, in Sri Lanka actually, and it's big brands, the big tech brands like Microsoft, working on AI for good projects, which is fantastic, making them accessible. And I've done the same. It's been going now for the last few months, and this is all free, this is pro bono, there's no sponsorship, there's no money exchanging hands, it's just trying to do some good. And so I pulled together a program with the Digital Transformation Expo, which is now virtual, next month, and pulled in PwC, the Alan Turing Institute, Microsoft, Amazon Web Services, University College London, my company, which is AI in Business. And it's basically closing the skills gap. So school children today, and I'm thinking in particular the 16, 17-year-olds who are going into the workplace, some of them are studying data science. Some of them are studying fashion, media, marketing, PR, but they're not being taught how is AI going to reshape our jobs going forward. And so this was an inclusive project with deaf students. It's been carried out in Kent with 2 comprehensive schools. So again, I didn't want fee-paying schools. I didn't want grammar selective schools. And there's a whole element to this of they do a competition, they receive mentoring from some top people, in industry. So that's really important. So that anyone can go and set up something like that. So don't wait for the world to catch up and for your sector to be regulated. Go out there, make it happen, get involved, do some good, think about what you're in business for, not just profits and, being on that treadmill for the next 30 years. In terms of AI for good and ethics and so on, this happened in the last couple of months. This group of countries, OECD countries, and they have set up this partnership on AI. So they're a group of countries, and basically what they're trying to do, the founding members are supporting responsible and human-centric development of AI. And so this is about AI that is tuned in to human rights, fundamental freedoms, and our shared democratic values. And that's a great piece of, that's a great initiative. And that I'd like to see, more of that happening. And I would encourage you to go and check that out and look at some of those themes. And if you don't have one and you're starting to get involved in AI, come up with your own code of conduct for your organization. The law, the regulators, the trade bodies, just like they were with social media. I was ahead of the pack with social media, and I was always on TV because there were always issues because the law hadn't yet caught up with the technology. And a similar thing again is happening with AI. So don't wait for everybody else. Get involved. And so how do you get involved? How do you prepare for the future is my last section before we break for some questions. And so, what does it mean for jobs? I know it's a frightening space when you are when you're out of your comfort zone, which is very much where I've been for quite a few years. I'm 53 and I keep getting comfortable and then shattering that and pushing myself out of my comfort zone. So I wrote that book, and now I've got a synopsis in for book 2, and you get scared and you're thinking, oh God, how am I going to do this? And you do it, and I think you need to do that. You need to push yourself, stretch yourself. Don't think it's all rosy for everybody else out there. It isn't. We're all in a similar space. We're all trying to, have a good life, earn a good living, but at the same time, if we can do some great work at the same time that will help other people, even more important. So what we've got in this slide, it's showing here how women workers could be more affected by automation over the next 10 years, but male jobs may actually be more at risk in the long term. And then on the right-hand side, you can see financial services jobs might be quite vulnerable to automation in the short term, but there might be other jobs that in the longer term, like transport, that again might be in that next wave. So the truth is, it's a lot of speculation. Nobody really knows. But what I would say to all of you is that it's not so much about jobs being lost. It's about the tasks you do changing. And so don't be frightened of it. A robot isn't coming and taking your job. But if you don't get up with the times and use the new tools and take advantage of it, in time, you could get left behind. And that's really what you want to prepare for, and make sure that doesn't actually happen. So I'm sharing with you in here in this one of these final slides my scorecard for success, which I call it, that's from my book, that a lot of companies are using to prepare. And I actually think it's equally applicable, not just for preparing for artificial intelligence in your business, but for life. Think of coping with COVID, coping with, God forbid, a future pandemic, coping with all kinds of business impacts and transformation. So it's really looking at what's the mindset. And what you do is you give yourself a score of 0 to 5 out of 10 sections. And therefore, you've got the opportunity to score up to 50. Anything below 20, and you're definitely more traditional. In the middle, you're transitioning. And 35 upwards, you're starting to use AI, you're exploiting it across different areas. But we're really looking at these sorts of areas. I'll pick on a few of them. Mindset. Do you have that agile, open, progressive mindset? Do you have the buy-in, the support from the board or from the management team? Really important. Number 3, do you have a business case? You're not just jumping on the bandwagon. You're saying, why do we need AI? What problem might it solve? Rather than just being very tactical with it and doing it because everybody is. Hand in hand with that goes number 4, which is experimentation, proofs of concept, making sure you roll it out. Initially do a small experimentation and proof of concept, and when you know it works, you spend more money and you roll it out to other departments, other parts of your organization. 5 is about collaboration. I mentioned earlier marketing and CX, customer experience, collaborating with the HR team, finance team, production, etc. But also maybe connecting with your supply chain, working with academia. 7, talent. We need to reskill, we need to hire, and so on. 8, absolutely, it's about culture. It's about an interdepartmental, outward-looking, very collaborative culture. 8 kind of goes without saying, really. It's about agility and openness and planning for disruption. And then 9 is really important for the reasons I gave a few minutes ago. It's about that wider impact of ethics, working with your trade bodies, understanding ethical AI. If you're going to use people's data, you need their consent. There is a clause in the GDPR that talks about that need for consent, not having the black box. So if you're an insurance company, for example, and you use AI and it makes a decision that says that young person in that postcode can't have that car insurance, you need to be able to explain why. And there's an amazing amount of contentious areas there of, facial recognition technology, decisions being made without a human in the loop, and therefore all kinds of problems being made. Bias, if the people that program the AI are equally biased, then you're going to fuel that bias. Whereas actually AI has the potential, with a human in the loop who is eclectic, who has, all of those different inputs from different areas, you have the opportunity to reduce bias. So really, that's where I wanted to leave you. I know I've thrown in a whole range of different important subjects there, and your heads are probably swirling around. But keep learning. I think my biggest advice to you all is to be like me, whether you're 20, whether you're 50, 70, whatever age you are. We're all on a journey of continuous learning. And there are some incredible tools out there, and we need to not just be comfortable with the ones we've used for the last few years, but try new ones, make sure they work for us. So here's a code. If any of you want to get the book, there's a discount code there for the book. The book's a year old, but it's just been translated into multiple different languages, and it has lots of case studies, but lots of advice, lots of discussions and chapters on ethics and explainability, and some of the big issues that are best discussed over a glass or two of wine, where you get into the big picture of our future and the importance of humans and humans and man side by side, in the office. But that's a bit more for the future. So that's what I really wanted to leave you with. I hope it's been useful. I think we've got some time now, for the next 5-10 minutes. If you have any questions, I'll certainly be hanging around for another 10 minutes or so. Not just questions, maybe you have observations, maybe you have a particular best practice tool or a horror story you want to share with us. So I'm here if you have any questions or you have any comments or observations. So thank you very much, particularly to Lucy and team, for great organisation as always, and an impressive lineup of people. So thank you.
Now? Yes. Hi, Katie. How are you doing?
Hey, Lucy. Really good. Thank you.
Good. Well, we have had a few questions come through. Thank you so much for such an awesome session. I always love hearing from you, Katie. So thought-provoking and interesting.
Thank you, Lucy.
My pleasure. Let's get into the questions then, because we've got about 10 minutes until Alice's session. So we've got quite a few questions, Katie. And I've also said to everybody that they are able to send you a message directly in the app to ask any questions, and you'll be able to answer it at your own kind of. Thank you so much. So the first question we have here is from Peter Sumpton, and he says, what are your thoughts on Raymond Kurzweil's predictions? I find it fascinating, he says.
So this is the whole kind of singularity. Again, from my research, and I spoke to some of the world's leading experts, top academics, business people, regulators. I think, no one really knows exactly what's going to happen. So like I said, there is a lot of speculation. I think you either fall on, you've got the kind of Jack Ma Alibaba, or you've got the sort of Elon Musk aspect to it. And if you have time, go and have a listen to it's around about an hour long, but you can dip into parts of it. You've got people at the different ends of the spectrum, and I sometimes question their reasons for saying what they say, because as I say, it is speculation, but nobody really knows. And I think the consensus from my book actually is pretty positive from some leading data scientists, that actually that may not ever happen. Kurzweil, I dealt with Max Tegmark, who's a professor from MIT, and they are predicting certain things. I mean, Yale University and Oxford University said that by 2023, AI can do everything a human can do. But that doesn't mean one robotic AI can do everything. It means there is narrow AI that can do one part of it, another. And so there's all these million different pieces, but not like the human brain. And I think in time, as neuroscience progresses and we understand how the neurons in the brain work, then in the future we might get closer to that sort of understanding of how that works, and therefore AI might get more into that realm. But at the moment, I can see 50 to 100 years into the future, maybe that will be the case. But for some time to come, we're looking at AI that's more able to augment our lives and augment the work that we do in our businesses.
Thank you, Katie. I hope that answered your question well, Peter. And we have two people asking a very similar question here. So Tristan Griffiths and also Nikki Carwood are asking, what use of AI has excited you most over the past couple of years?
That's a good question. The honest answer is in education. I've seen it, it's cool. I've seen it in HR, I've seen it in marketing, I've seen it in finance and construction. I mean, it's really cool to see hospitals being built in record time. So in construction, AI is helping build hospitals and do all kinds of incredible work. That's slightly more robotic process automation. But in true sort of AI terms, I would say the work that we've not done in the UK yet, but I've seen it in Dubai and in other countries where British companies and other countries have amazing AI tools that are helping teachers look at a classroom and schedule lessons and do some of the behind the scenes work, but more importantly, making a child's work more interesting, more personalized. So if think of a class of 30 kids, some have got certain learning disabilities, some are much far ahead than others, some are dyslexic. The excitement to be able to sort of democratize that powerful education for everybody, and then to see kids in Africa, in India, who can take advantage of that in developing countries, I think that for me is really, really exciting.
Oh, very exciting stuff. So we also have a question here. Actually, I think these questions are quite similar, but we have Danny says, on a mission to bust stereotypes with the question, what do you mean by male and female jobs, e.g. more women are going into tech and engineer jobs? And Ella was just talking about how an interesting point about bias, like who's programming the AI, and she often wonders that with the social media algorithms as well.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, and I think that research there, it's current research, but you're right in terms of the way it's framed. Maybe that's done in it's quite a sexist approach to it, but in certain countries, less so, in Europe, in Europe, but in certain countries, you do have certain, you have male female roles, you have, it's not, there isn't that same kind of equality. So I take that point, absolutely valid point. What the next one was about bias, wasn't it? Which I did mention briefly. It's a really tricky one. It's very contentious. When you think about autonomous vehicles and you talk about things like, if an autonomous vehicle is going to hit somebody, is it going to do it because it's an old woman here in the left-hand track, or a young man, young guy, dad with his child? And there's all kinds of, how is it programmed to handle that? But I think the big thing for me is, it is trying to eliminate that bias, and that bias could be gender, could be race, could be religion. And that's why the data is so important. And all of these successful projects start with a very important, robust, diverse data set. And so at that level, when you as a team, whether you're doing it in your marketing or in your HR, when you are putting the data together and the companies that you use to outsource it to, or which tool you buy in, that they are important questions to be asking. So that's there's still a lot of work to be done in that space. Not everything is as ordered as you might expect, but there's a lot of discussion around that.
Fantastic, really interesting. And Catherine, I think we've got time for one final question, Katie. Thank you so much. Yep. Catherine Dunning asking, what are the first steps you would suggest taking in order to get involved in AI?
Yeah, great question. The first step is, what problem do I have that I think could be solved by it? Have a watching brief on the competition. So depending on what your job function is and what sector you're in, how is your industry sector? So it's research. Have a watching brief, think about the problems, then go out and do your research, get your quotes, do your due diligence. They're really important steps. But the mindset of the management team, so that they understand the need for it. So training, training, research, keeping up to speed is so important.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that insight, Katie. It's been absolutely amazing. I would suggest everybody go out and get Katie's book. It's great. We've got it in the office here and we've passed it around the team. We're big fans. Please do feel free to contact Katie, like I said, in the app, and ask any questions that you might have. But for now, I'm going to say a huge thank you. And if you can, please, from your home office or your office, give Katie a round of applause, just as though we were at the big event itself. Thank you very much, Katie.
And to you too. And to you too. Nice to see you all. Thank you. Take care. Bye. Bye.